Hello, my name is Manaswi Gurav and I am a second year student of the MSc Counseling course at Bangor University. First of all, I want to thank all of my group mates whose invaluable collaboration made this journey possible. Before we begin, a personal confession. Goodbyes have always been challenging for me, whether it's saying farewell to a close friend or a client or wrapping up an educational degree like this one. There is something about endings that makes me sad, and this complexity is what attracted me to this topic. So, welcome to my presentation, Meeting Unexpected Farewells, Trainee Counsellors' Experience of Sudden Endings in Personal Therapy and Supervision. So, why study ending of human relationships? Well, a very simple answer. Endings are an inevitable occurrence in life. We want to study this phenomena so that we can understand how humans respond and navigate through these endings. As Carol said, ending of human relationships activate different issues for different people, and most of them raise issues of loss. And through this study, we specifically want to understand how counselors navigate through endings, because their life experiences can have a notable impact on their practice. Research suggests that counselors experiencing personal bereavement brought both challenges and developments to their therapeutic practice. Counselors experienced greater empathy and congruence with their clients, but on the other hand, they also expressed concerns about their own vulnerability, risk of over-empathizing with the client, and ultimately guiding them. Therefore, it is important to understand how counselors experienced endings of relationships. So, as said before, endings are part of human experience, and one such ending is the ending of professional relationships and therapeutic relationships being one of them. Research suggests that termination of therapeutic relationship can evoke a range of emotions, including grief, anxiety, anger, and abandonment. And these emotions are collaboratively resolved by the client and the counselor during the termination phase, which is the last phase of the therapeutic process. Hence, the termination phase is so important. But this can only happen when the termination is planned and mutually agreed. If the process suddenly comes to an end, the clients do not receive the opportunity to address these emotions, and they are left alone to deal with them by themselves. And that's why the abrupt elimination of the safe therapeutic environment can adversely impact the clients. Therapists also undergo personal therapy, in which they may also experience sudden endings. We wanted to understand how counselors experience sudden endings. Does their training help them to deal with these any better? Or if they do experience adverse reactions like others? And if so, how it impacts their practice, as it may raise questions about their emotional health and fitness to practice. It also occurred to us that another important relationship in counselor's life is the supervisory relationship. Research into the topic suggested that there is a possibility of attachment in a supervisory relationship as well, and that the counselor may cling to their supervisor. Termination of successful supervisory relationship may also evoke feelings of anxiety and loss for counselors. And drawing the parallels here, the sudden ending of this relationship may also not give the counselors the opportunity to address these feelings, leaving them to deal with these alone. Previous literature addresses the experience of counselors' bereavement in their personal relationships, like family members or friends, and its impact on their therapeutic practice. However, there is a lack of research on counselors' distinct experience of sudden ending of relationship with their personal therapists or supervisors and its impact on their therapeutic work. Hence, this research aims to understand counselors' experience of sudden endings of personal therapy or supervision and its impact on their therapeutic practice. The current study was a qualitative research and the data was collected through semi-structured interviews. An advert was circulated by the researchers, which included a link to an online form, which consisted of a consent form and an information sheet. The survey was created using the SciToolkit platform. The form also asked for participants' demographic details and background information about their therapeutic practice and the sudden ending. An MS Teams interview invitation was sent to the participants who filled the online form. The interview involved using pre-constructed prompts that were created by the researchers. The transcripts were verified against the recording and then were sent to participants for review and approval. Data was analyzed through thematic analysis to identify recurrent patterns. 6 participants were drawn from the population through purposive sampling. The population were trainee counselors who had experienced sudden ending of personal therapy or supervision during their practice. The inclusion criteria for this study can be seen on the screen. This study adheres to the BACP guidelines for ethical research and practice and has been approved by the Bangor University School of Psychology and Sports Science Research Ethics and Governance Committee. Participants were made aware about their right to withdraw, confidentiality, data protection, possible side effects of participation, signposting resources for further support, recording and transcription in the online form and the interview as well. Consent was obtained through online form and verbally during the interview. Researchers provided a verbal debrief to the participants at the end of the interview and also sent a written debrief, including signposting resources. Results. So, 3 primary themes were identified, which were emotional continuum, cognitive responses, and professional impact, which had their own sub-themes as well. Let's look at each one of them closely. Number 1. Emotional continuum. This theme is described as a spectrum of emotions. All participants experienced some emotional reactions towards the sudden ending, ranging from anger, betrayal, to grief. And the intensity of these emotions were different for different participants. This theme is divided into 2 sub-themes: immediate emotional responses and long-term emotions. So the participants experienced immediate emotional responses following the sudden ending. As participants describe, I was first surprised, then angry, then frustrated, and then disappointed. Another participant said, really disappointed and hurt. I was fighting inside. However, for most participants, the emotions did not persist for a long time. As one participant said, I think it doesn't matter too much now. However, there was an exception. Participant 6 of our current study expressed feelings of grief, which were characterized by sadness and longing. They also experienced physical reactions while talking about the ending in the interview. As they expressed, I still feel a lot of stuckness, frustrated, and upset. The second theme is cognitive responses, which highlights the various ways through which participants interpreted the sudden ending. 2 sub-themes were identified: second-guessing selves and acceptance over time. Most of the participants who were not given a reason behind the sudden ending questioned themselves, their own sense of being, or their professional competence. As participants describe, am I not a good enough client? Am I not sad enough in my experiences? Is there something wrong with me? Maybe she doesn't want to be my supervisor. It was also observed that participants accepted the ending over time. They were able to give them personal meanings, interpretations that helped them to move forward. As one of our participants described, I feel like I already achieved something if the client is happy. And that really helped me to put this in the past. Here again, participant 6 was an exception. They clearly communicated that they haven't made peace with the ending yet. The third theme, professional impact, is divided into 3 sub-themes. Number 1, an absence of perceived impact on client work. So, all the participants reported that they did not observe any significant impact on client work, which leads us to the second subtheme, preventive factors. These were the elements that were observed that may have prevented an impact on client work. Most of the participants with supervisory endings said that an additional supervisor or a replacement one helped them. As one participant described, since supervision is to cover a need, and that need was immediately covered by a new one. The two participants with therapeutic endings demonstrated some sort of compartmentalization between their personal and professional experiences. As one participant described, my work is directly impacted by supervision rather than personal therapy. The third subtheme is professional development through reflection. Most of the participants engaged in some reflection following the ending on how they would approach similar situations. I know what I would do differently, how I explain myself to the clients, a little bit more communication so that the client doesn't feel the way I did. So, our finding of various and immediate emotional responses like confusion, disappointment, frustration is in line with the previous research. The experience was different for each participant, different intensity, different emotions. Two participants expressed intense anger, and one participant expressed prolonged emotions of grief. The varied emotional responses of participants highlight the role of contextual factors in which the counselors experienced the sudden ending. Factors that emerged in the current study were the duration and depth of the relationship. So it was observed that participants who were engaged with their counselors or supervisors for a short duration of time reported an absence of long-term emotions. This could be because they might not have yet established a deep emotional bond, thus experiencing emotions that did not have a lasting effect. On the other hand, participant 6, whose relationship with their counselor extended beyond 2 years, experienced strong and long-term emotions of grief and anger. This finding highlights the importance of acknowledging the possibility of intense and prolonged emotions in counselors who experience sudden endings in their long-term therapeutic relationships. Previous research indicated that counselors who have experienced grief in their personal lives expressed concerns about their own vulnerability and empathy. Since sudden ending of therapeutic relationships can also result in grief, as indicated by previous literature and participant 6 of the current study, this may raise questions about their fitness to practice. However, no significant impact on client work was observed, suggesting that personal bereavement cannot be equated to the experience of suddenly losing a therapist. This may be because therapeutic relationship is inherently a boundaried relationship, which may influence the nature of emotions associated with it. This also brings us to the factors that might have prevented an impact on client work. Participants who experienced a sudden ending with their therapist exhibited some sort of compartmentalization between their personal and professional experiences. It is possible that they might have utilized some strategies to maintain a boundary between their personal experience of losing a therapeutic space and their professional work with clients. This could be understood through the concepts of role boundaries and role transitioning. So, role boundaries refer to the features of a particular social role. For example, a role of being a father has its own features and responsibilities, and a role of being an engineer has its own. And individuals transition between each role to navigate through the social expectations. In this context of sudden endings, participants may have established role boundaries between their roles of being a client and a counselor, which may have prevented the impact of emotions experienced as a client on their therapeutic work as a counselor. Also, participants who experienced endings with their supervisors did not report any impact on client work as they had another or replacement supervisor ready. Further, this finding of lack of any observable impact on client work also demonstrates the ingrained resilience within mental health professionals. They are trained to cope with the emotional ups and downs as part of their journey. Although participants declared an absence of any observable impact, the possibility of unconscious impact on client work cannot be ignored. One of the participants did communicate the possibility of subconscious effect regarding trust and confidence. Participants experienced feelings of betrayal, grief, anger. They doubted themselves, felt unworthy, personal rejection. These emotions, if left unresolved, may result in countertransference, which can influence their attitudes and interactions with clients. They may exhibit avoidance behaviors, their attitude regarding trust and self-disclosure may change, and etc. Additionally, personal therapists and supervisors may serve as role models to counselors, especially trainee counselors. So, mismanaged endings may influence their attitudes towards terminations, potentially normalizing this approach. Despite the possibility of presence of hidden influences on therapeutic work, participants demonstrated professional growth through reflection. They considered their own mismanaged endings and reflected on alternative approaches. This shows their commitment to professional growth and reflective ethical practice. Limitations and future studies. So, the very duration of relationships presented as a limitation of the study. Participant who was in a long-term relationship experienced grief, which is in contrast with the experience of participants with shorter duration of relationship. This highlights the need of future research focusing particularly on endings of long-term relationships where emotional reactions are more complex and intense, which may make the counselor more vulnerable in practice. Future studies may benefit from recruiting qualified counselors as they may have established long-term relationships with their supervisors. So, this study highlighted the importance of ethical endings in counseling and supervision because there is a real possibility of countertransference. Secondly, this approach of mismanaged endings, if normalized within the therapeutic community, it may adversely impact the clients who may not have the tools to manage emotions like counselors do. Therefore, the information about potential consequences of sudden endings can be integrated in counseling training programs. In addition, counseling organizations can formulate necessary procedures to promote accountability and ethical practice. Considering the finding of the current study wherein participant who received an explanation for the sudden ending did not experience self-doubt, communication procedures can be adopted to keep the clients and supervisees informed. For example, an email or letter or a closing call giving a brief description or explanation regarding the ending can help the client and supervisees to mitigate their thoughts of self-doubt. Additional support such as replacement supervisors or counselors or referral information can also be provided by the organizations. In case of chronic illness, the possibility of death can be discussed beforehand with the client. Also, the subsequent counselor or supervisor who takes up the client or supervisee after the sudden ending can also provide support by exploring the nature of previous relationship and the emotions evoked by the sudden ending. Lastly, goodbyes are part of therapeutic community as well. But it is important to remember that sudden endings, if not inevitable, can be managed in a way that can lessen its negative impact. This brings me to the end of the presentation. Thank you so much for listening.